Marcus Thompson had always been the type of person who prepared for everything. His basement was stocked with enough canned goods to last 6 months. His truck had emergency supplies, and he'd taken every survival course offered within 100 miles of his small Montana town. What he hadn't prepared for was his neighbor Bradley Morrison, calling him paranoid right up until the morning the emergency broadcast started. The first reports came in around dawn on a Tuesday. Marcus was drinking coffee on his porch when his radio crackled to life with news of strange incidents in major cities. People attacking others with no apparent reason, victims rising after fatal injuries, authorities overwhelmed. Bradley, trimming his hedge next door, laughed when Marcus mentioned it. "Another one of your conspiracy theories, Marcus. Let me guess, the government's testing mind control again." Bradley's voice dripped with the same condescension he'd used for the past 3 years since Marcus moved to Millfield. The man had made it his personal mission to undermine everything Marcus said at town meetings, HOA gatherings, and neighborhood barbecues. By noon, the laughter had died. National Guard units were mobilizing. The president addressed the nation, his face grave as he declared martial law in affected areas. Marcus watched from his living room as footage showed chaos in Seattle, Portland, and Denver. The infected moved with jerky, unnatural gaits, their eyes clouded white, blood staining their clothes. Bradley knocked on Marcus's door that evening, his usual smugness replaced by nervous energy. "Hey Marcus, I was thinking maybe we should stick together during this whole thing. You know, neighbors helping neighbors." Marcus studied the man who had spent months mocking his preparedness, who had filed noise complaints about his generator tests, who had tried to get the HOA to ban his amateur radio antenna. "Interesting timing, Bradley. Look, I know we've had our differences, but this is serious. My wife Jennifer is scared, and our kids keep asking questions we can't answer." Bradley shifted his weight, avoiding eye contact. "You've got supplies, equipment. We could pool our resources. The same resources you called excessive last month at the HOA meeting, when you suggested the neighborhood needed rules about survivalist hoarding." Marcus kept his voice level, professional. "I specifically remember you saying people like me were the real danger to community safety." The power went out that night. Marcus's generator hummed to life automatically while the rest of the street plunged into darkness. His radio picked up scattered transmissions from emergency services, each more desperate than the last. The infection was spreading faster than anyone had anticipated. Cities were falling. Rural areas were next, through his night vision scope. Marcus watched shapes moving through the woods behind his property. They stumbled between trees with that distinctive shambling gait he'd seen on the news. 3 of them, maybe 4. He'd been tracking their movement for an hour when Bradley appeared at his back door, pounding frantically. "Marcus, they're in the neighborhood." Jenny saw one by the Patterson house. Bradley's family huddled behind him, his 2 young children clinging to their mother's legs. "Please, we need help." Marcus let them in, his mind already calculating resources, space, defensive positions. His house was built like a fortress compared to the McMansions surrounding it. Steel-reinforced doors, security bars on windows, multiple exit routes. Everything Bradley had complained about to the city planning committee. "The Patterson house is 3 doors down," Marcus said, checking his rifle. "If they're there, we need to know how many and which direction they're moving." Jennifer Morrison spoke for the first time, her voice shaking. "There were 2 by their mailbox when I looked out our bedroom window. They were just standing there, swaying. Were they moving toward houses or just wandering?" Marcus pulled up, building schematics on his tablet, marking potential entry points throughout the neighborhood. "Toward the Henderson place," Bradley answered. "Marcus, I know what you're thinking. I know I gave you grief about all this preparation stuff. But my kids, your kids are safe here," Marcus interrupted. "But we need to establish some ground rules. This isn't a democracy anymore, Bradley. In crisis situations, experience and preparation determine leadership, not neighborhood politics. Through the radio static, they heard the first screams from down the street. Marcus grabbed his equipment bag and spare magazines. Outside, emergency sirens wailed in the distance. Growing fainter by the hour, the authorities weren't coming. The cavalry wasn't riding over the hill. It was just them against whatever was stumbling through their quiet suburban neighborhood. "Stay away from windows," Marcus instructed, handing Bradley a baseball bat from his emergency supplies. "Keep the children in the interior bathroom if shooting starts. And Bradley, everything you thought you knew about survival just became irrelevant." The screaming stopped after 20 minutes, leaving only the sound of Marcus's generator and the distant wail of car alarms. Through his reinforced windows, he could see the Hendersons' front door hanging open, darkness beyond. No movement, no lights, no signs of life. Bradley paced the living room like a caged animal, his earlier arrogance completely evaporated. "We should check on them. The Hendersons have been our neighbors for 8 years. Tom helped me build my deck last summer." "Tom Henderson is either dead or infected," Marcus replied, adjusting his radio to scan emergency frequencies. "Either way, he's not your neighbor anymore." Jennifer Morrison sat on the couch with her children, 10-year-old Emma and 7-year-old David, trying to keep them calm while her own hands shook. She'd always been polite to Marcus, unlike her husband, but had never spoken against Bradley's constant criticism either. Now she looked at Marcus like he was their only hope of survival. "How long do we wait?" she asked. "How long before we know if help is coming?" Marcus pulled up weather data on his tablet. "Storm system moving in tomorrow night. Radio communications will be compromised. If official help was coming, they'd have been here by now." He looked at the family huddled in his living room, people who had treated him like a paranoid outsider for 3 years. "We're on our own." The radio crackled with a weak transmission from the county sheriff's department. All units. Station overrun. Repeat, station overrun. Civilians advised to shelter in place. Do not attempt to reach evacuation centers. Repeat, do not attempt to reach evacuation centers." Bradley stopped pacing. "Overrun?" "The sheriff's station has 20 deputies and military-grade equipment." Had Marcus corrected. Past tense. He moved to his surveillance monitors, checking cameras he'd installed around his property 6 months ago. Another thing Bradley had complained about, calling them an invasion of privacy. Motion sensor just triggered on the north side. On the screen, they watched 2 figures stumble across Marcus's backyard. Former humans, their clothes torn and stained with dark patches. One wore a jogging outfit, the other a postal worker's uniform. Both moved with that horrible, unnatural gait, heads tilted at wrong angles. "That's Rebecca from the post office," Jennifer whispered. "She delivered our mail yesterday morning." "Not anymore," Marcus said. He pulled his rifle from its rack and checked the chamber. "Bradley, you know how to use this?" Bradley stared at the weapon like it might bite him. "I've never fired a gun in my life. You know that. I was part of the group that petitioned the city council about your target shooting. Ironic timing." Marcus handed him a pistol instead. "Point and pull the trigger. Safety's off. Don't shoot unless they're inside the house." Through the monitors, they watched more figures emerge from the tree line. 7, then 10, then too many to count easily. They moved in a loose group, drawn by something beyond the camera's range. The generator's hum, perhaps, or the scent of living people. "They're surrounding the house," Bradley said, his voice cracking. "No, they're following the fence line. Probably drawn by the motion sensors." Marcus had designed his property's defenses to funnel threats toward predetermined kill zones. They don't think tactically, but they respond to stimuli. Emma Morrison started crying softly. "I want to go home." "Honey, we can't go home right now," Jennifer said, pulling her daughter closer. "Why not? What's wrong with the scary people? Marcus knelt beside the girl. They're sick, Emma, very sick. And when people are that sick, they can't think clearly anymore. They might hurt you without meaning to. Like when Grandpa had that brain thing and didn't remember us? Similar, but worse. Marcus looked at Jennifer, who nodded gratefully. That's why we're staying here where it's safe. Bradley moved to the window, trying to peer through the security bars. How many supplies do you actually have? Food, water, ammunition. Enough. Marcus didn't elaborate. He'd learned long ago not to reveal the full extent of his preparations, especially to neighbors who'd spent years trying to get his storage shed declared a code violation. Enough for how long? For how many people? Longer than it will take for things to stabilize. Marcus checked his watch. The infection spreads through bites, but victims turn within hours. Fast-moving outbreak, but also self-limiting. The infected don't coordinate, don't use tools, don't problem solve. They'll burn through available food sources quickly. You're talking about people like they're animals, Jennifer said. Because they're not people anymore. The sooner you accept that, the longer you'll survive. Marcus pointed to the monitor, showing his driveway. That's Mrs. Chun from down the street. Yesterday she was baking cookies for the church fundraiser. Today she's trying to bite through my fence. On screen, the elderly woman who had organized neighborhood watch meetings for 15 years clawed at the chain link, her fingers bloody, her face a mask of mindless hunger. Behind her, more figures pressed forward, adding their weight to the fence. The perimeter will hold, Marcus said. But we need to be ready if it doesn't. Bradley sat heavily in a chair, the pistol awkward in his hands. This is insane. Yesterday, our biggest problem was arguing about lawn maintenance schedules. Yesterday you filed a complaint about my emergency preparedness violating HOA regulations, Marcus reminded him. Today you're alive because of it. The radio hissed with another transmission, faint and breaking up. Denver has fallen. Repeat, Denver has fallen. Military forces in full retreat. Civilian populations advised to remain indoors and await further instructions. Marcus turned off the radio. No point in further updates. They all said the same thing. The world was ending and nobody was coming to save them. The fence held through the night, but by morning the infected had found weak points. Marcus watched through his monitors as they pressed against the gate mechanism, their combined weight gradually bending the hinges. He'd designed the perimeter to delay, not permanently stop, and 24 hours of constant pressure was taking its toll. Bradley hadn't slept, alternating between pacing and staring out windows despite Marcus's warnings. There are more of them now. How is that possible? Where are they all coming from? Population density, Marcus explained, cleaning his rifle for the third time. Millfield has 8,000 residents. Even a 10% infection rate puts 800 of them out there. He gestured toward the monitors, showing shambling figures scattered across his property. They follow sound, movement, scent. Once a few show up, others follow. Jennifer tried to maintain normalcy for her children, reading them stories and playing quiet games. But Emma kept asking why they couldn't go home, and David had started having nightmares about the sick people outside. The stress was showing. On all of them. We need to make a run for it, Bradley announced suddenly. Load up your truck, drive to the next county. Get away from this mess. Marcus didn't look up from his weapon maintenance. Roads are blocked. Heard it on the radio yesterday before I turned it off. Abandoned vehicles, barricades, infected crowds at every major intersection. So we go cross-country. Your truck has four-wheel drive. And then what? Set up camp in the wilderness with 2 young children and no long-term shelter? Marcus set down his cleaning rod. Bradley, you spent 3 years complaining that I was paranoid for having a 2-week food supply. Now you want to bet your family's lives on finding safety somewhere else? At least we'd be moving. Doing something instead of sitting here waiting to die. We're not waiting to die. We're waiting for them to die. Marcus pulled up a tablet showing news feeds from before the networks went dark. Look at this footage from Phoenix. Infected don't eat, don't drink, don't rest. They're burning through their bodies' energy reserves at an unsustainable rate. The images showed hordes of infected stumbling through desert streets, but Marcus had noticed something the news anchors missed. The ones from the earliest reports looked noticeably thinner, weaker. Their movements had become more sluggish. You're betting our lives on the theory, Bradley said. I'm betting our lives on observable data and established biological principles. Marcus closed the tablet. Your plan is to drive blind into unknown territory with no supplies, no intel, and no backup plan. Which one sounds more like a gamble? A crash from outside ended the argument. Through the monitors, they watched a section of fence collapse under the weight of infected bodies. Dozens of them stumbled through the gap, spreading across Marcus's carefully maintained yard. Get the children to the safe room, Marcus ordered, grabbing his rifle and spare magazines. Jennifer, you know where I showed you yesterday. What about Bradley? She asked. Bradley's coming with me. Marcus tossed him the pistol. Time to learn on the job. They moved to Marcus's reinforced mud room, which offered firing positions through specially designed ports. Marcus had built it 2 years ago, another project that had earned him complaints about militarizing the neighborhood. Now it was the only thing between them and 20 infected former neighbors. I can't do this, Bradley whispered, staring at the approaching figures. That's Bill Henderson. I played poker with him last Thursday. Bill Henderson died Thursday night, Marcus replied, taking aim. What's walking around in his body isn't him anymore. The first shots echoed through the house. Marcus's bullets found their marks with practiced precision, center mass hits that dropped targets immediately. Bradley's first shot went wide. His second hit an infected woman in the shoulder without stopping her advance. Head shots, Marcus called out between his own shots. Only head shots put them down permanently. I can't aim for someone's head. These were our neighbors. Then aim for center mass and hope they stay down long enough for me to finish them. Marcus reloaded smoothly, muscle memory from countless hours of practice. Your choice, Bradley. Squeamishness or survival. Through the firing port, they could see more infected pouring through the broken fence. The postal worker Rebecca was among them, still wearing her uniform, still carrying her mailbag. She'd been a fixture in the neighborhood for 8 years. Always stopping to chat about the weather or local events, Bradley's third shot caught her in the chest. She stumbled but kept advancing, that terrible blank stare fixed on their position. Marcus's follow-up shot ended her movement permanently. How many more? Bradley asked, his voice shaking. Enough. Marcus counted targets through his scope. Ammunitions. Not unlimited. We need to thin the herd, then retreat to secondary positions. The safe room had been designed with multiple fallback points throughout the house. Marcus had learned military tactics during his army service, knowledge that Bradley had once dismissed as living in the past. Now those same tactics were keeping them alive. Marcus, Jennifer's voice came through the intercom. More of them are coming from the street. The Henderson house is on fire. Through a periscope Marcus had installed, they could see smoke rising from 3 houses down the block. Whether accident or design, the fire was spreading, and it was driving more infected toward their position. Time to move, Marcus announced. We're falling back to the 2nd floor. Better angles, more escape routes. As they retreated through his house, Bradley looked around at the reinforced doors, the security cameras, the emergency supplies neatly organized in every room. All the things he'd spent years trying to get banned through HOA regulations. You really did prepare for this, he said. I prepared for a lot of things. This just happened to be one of them. Marcus locked the mudroom door behind them, buying precious minutes. The question now is whether you're ready to do what survival actually requires. Outside, the infected continued their relentless advance, and the fires continued to spread. The second floor provided a tactical advantage Marcus had planned for, but hoped never to use. From the master bedroom window, he could see the full scope of their situation. The infected had spread throughout his yard, but they moved without coordination, bumping into each other and obstacles with no apparent frustration. More concerning was the orange glow growing brighter down the street as fires consumed house after house. "The whole neighborhood's going up," Bradley observed, pressing his face against the reinforced glass. "The Pattersons, the Kowalskis, even the old Murphy place." "Electrical fires, gas leaks, unattended stoves," Marcus replied, checking his equipment. "Infrastructure fails when there's nobody left to maintain it." He pointed to a group of infected clustered around a fallen power line, sparks cascading over their heads without any reaction. "They don't feel pain, don't process danger signals." Jennifer's voice crackled through the intercom from the safe. "Room, how long do we stay up there? The children are asking questions I don't know how to answer." Bradley grabbed the microphone. "Tell them Daddy's helping Uncle Marcus fix something outside." He looked at Marcus apologetically. "I know I'm not really their uncle, but they need something normal to hold on to." "Uncle Marcus," Marcus repeated with dark humor. "6 months ago, you tried to get the city to force me to remove my ham radio antenna because it was an eyesore that lowered property values. That was before." Bradley's voice was quiet. "Before I understood what you were really preparing for." Through the tactical scope, Marcus counted at least 40 infected in his immediate area, with more shambling in from neighboring streets. The fence breach had turned his property into a funnel, concentrating the threat but also creating an opportunity. "See that propane tank by my workshop?" Marcus pointed to a large cylinder barely visible through the crowd of infected. "I can hit it from here, clear about half of them at once." Bradley stared at him. "You're talking about blowing up your own property. Property's already lost. Question is whether we go down with it or use it strategically." Marcus adjusted his scope. "The explosion will attract more of them, but it'll also thin the current group and give us mobility options. What if the fire spreads to the house? Then we use the tunnel." "What tunnel?" Bradley's voice rose. "What haven't you told us?" Marcus had never mentioned the escape route he'd dug 2 years ago, connecting his basement to a concealed exit near the creek behind his property. Another project that would have triggered endless HOA complaints if discovered. Now it represented their only guaranteed escape path. "Insurance policy," Marcus said simply. "Same as everything else you've been complaining about." The sound of breaking glass came from downstairs. Through the security monitors, they watched infected pouring through his kitchen window, the reinforced glass finally giving way under sustained pressure. Marcus had expected this. Every defensive position had a breaking point. "Time to go," he announced. "Bradley, get your family. We're moving to the tunnel." They regrouped in the safe room, a reinforced space in the basement that Marcus had designed as both shelter and armory. Emma and David Morrison huddled against their mother, trying to make sense of the chaos around them. Jennifer looked exhausted, the strain of maintaining calm for her children showing in every line of her face. "Where does the tunnel go?" she asked. "Creek bed, about 200 yards east. Hidden exit under a fallen log." Marcus distributed emergency packs he'd prepared for exactly this scenario. Each pack has 3 days of food, water purification tablets, first aid supplies, and basic tools. Bradley hefted his pack, surprised by the weight. "You made these for us?" "I made them for whoever might need them." Marcus sealed the safe room door behind them, activating electronic locks that would buy them time. Part of comprehensive emergency planning. The tunnel was cramped but functional, reinforced with concrete and equipped with battery-powered lighting. Marcus had dug it over 6 months, working at night to avoid neighborhood scrutiny. The same neighbors who were now depending on his paranoia for their survival. "This is incredible," Jennifer whispered as they crawled through the passage. "How? Did you build this without anyone knowing?" "Very carefully, and with a lot of noise complaints filed against my mysterious late-night construction projects," Marcus replied, glancing at Bradley. They emerged near Running Creek, the same waterway that Bradley had tried to get designated as a protected wetland to prevent Marcus from installing his water filtration system. Now that system was their primary source of clean drinking water, and the creek provided concealment from infected who seemed drawn to higher ground and human structures. "What's the plan now?" Bradley asked, helping his children navigate the muddy bank. Marcus consulted a laminated map he pulled from his pack. "Temporary shelter in the old Hartwell cabin, about 3 miles upstream. Been abandoned for 20 years, but I've maintained it as a backup location." "You've been maintaining an abandoned cabin?" Jennifer asked. "Property owner died, heirs live in California, and forgot about it. I've been keeping it functional in exchange for theoretical rent payments they never asked about." Marcus folded the map, another insurance policy. Behind them, an explosion lit up the night sky as Marcus's house went up in flames. The propane tank detonation he'd planned from the second floor had worked perfectly, clearing his property of infected while creating a distraction that would draw others away from their escape route. Bradley watched his former neighbor's house burn, along with the workshop where Marcus had tried to teach him basic electrical repair, the garden where Marcus had offered to share vegetables, the driveway where Marcus had always waved politely despite years of hostility. "I'm sorry," Bradley said quietly, "about everything. The complaints, the HOA meetings, the things I said about you being paranoid." Marcus adjusted his pack straps and checked his compass. "Save the apologies for when we're all still alive to hear them." But as they started their trek upstream, following a route Marcus had scouted and marked months ago, Bradley couldn't shake the feeling that Marcus had already forgiven him. The emergency packs, the tunnel, the maintained cabin, all of it suggested a man who'd prepared not just for his own survival, but for his neighbor's survival too, even the neighbors who'd spent 3 years trying to stop him. The Hartwell cabin sat in a clearing 2 miles from the nearest road, surrounded by dense pine forest that had grown wild in the decades since Old Man Hartwell died. Marcus had spent countless weekends over the past 2 years bringing it back to livable condition, hauling in supplies on a modified ATV trail that connected to an abandoned logging road. "This is where you've been disappearing to every Saturday morning," Jennifer realized as Marcus unlocked the heavy wooden door. "Bradley always wondered what you were doing with that trailer and a TV." "Building us a lifeline," Marcus replied, lighting an oil lamp inside. The cabin's interior revealed careful preparation. Shelves stocked with canned goods, a wood-burning stove with seasoned firewood stacked nearby, sleeping bags laid out on sturdy wooden bunks, and a sophisticated water filtration system connected to the creek outside. Emma and David Morrison ran to the windows, pressing their faces against glass that Marcus had reinforced with security film. "It's like camping," Emma exclaimed, the first time she'd sounded excited since the crisis began. Bradley walked slowly through the space, taking in every detail. "How long have you been working on this place?" 2 years, give or take." Marcus checked the radio equipment he'd installed in a corner alcove. "Started right after the town council meeting where you suggested my preparedness activities might indicate psychological instability requiring professional evaluation." The words hung in the air like a physical weight. Bradley remembered that meeting, remembered the laughter from other residents when he'd made that comment. It had seemed clever at the time, a way to put the weird neighbor in his place. Now it felt like the coolest thing he'd ever said. "Marcus, help me check the perimeter sensors," Marcus interrupted. "We need to know if anything followed us." They walked the cabin's defensive positions together, Bradley learning about motion detectors hidden in trees, tripwires connected to early warning bells and carefully maintained sight lines that provided advance notice of approaching threats. Every system was elegant, functional, and completely invisible to casual observation. You could have lived like a king out here. Bradley said. Why didn't you just leave town when things got bad? Why help us? Marcus paused at a sensor array, checking battery levels. Because leaving people to die isn't preparation, it's paranoia. There's a difference. Through the cabin's radio they picked up scattered transmissions from survivor groups across the region. Most were desperate pleas for help or final messages from people trapped in overrun positions. But some offered hope, reports of safe zones being established, military units regrouping, civilian evacuation centers that were actually functional. Listen to this, Marcus called them over to the radio. National Guard unit in Billings is requesting contact from survivors in the Millfield area. They're establishing a secure perimeter around the airport. Jennifer grabbed the microphone. This is Jennifer Morrison, transmitting from the Hartwell Creek area. We have 5 survivors, including 2 children. Do you copy? Static answered them. For long minutes before a crackling voice responded. Morrison family, this is Sergeant Rodriguez, Montana National Guard. Confirm your location and status. We're approximately 8 miles northeast of Millfield, sheltered in a secure location. No injuries, adequate supplies. Jennifer looked at Marcus, who nodded approvingly at her precise communication. Ma'am, we're coordinating evacuations for the next 72 hours. After that, we're pulling back to consolidated defensive positions. Can you reach Highway 89? Marcus took the microphone. Sergeant, this is Marcus Thompson. Highway 89 has been compromised since day 2. Multiple vehicle barricades, infected concentrations at all major intersections. We'd need an alternative extraction point. Copy that, Mr. Thompson. Stand by for alternate coordinates. While they waited for the guard's response, Marcus showed the Morrison family how to operate the cabin systems. The solar panels that powered their communications equipment, the rainwater collection system he'd integrated with natural runoff patterns, the food cache he'd buried 50 yards away as backup supplies. You've thought of everything, David Morrison said, watching Marcus demonstrate the hand crank radio. At 7 years old, he'd adapted to their situation with the resilience of childhood, accepting their new reality without the emotional baggage that paralyzed adults. I thought of everything I could imagine, Marcus corrected. But there's always something you miss. As if summoned by his words, the perimeter alarm sounded. Not the sharp electronic beep of the motion sensors, but the deep brass tone of the manual bell system that indicated something large had triggered the tripwires on the main approach trail. Everyone to positions, Marcus ordered, grabbing his rifle. Bradley, remember what I taught you about sight alignment. Jennifer, get the children to the back room and be ready to use the emergency exit if I give the signal. Through binoculars, Marcus scanned the tree line for movement. The infected typically moved in small groups or individuals, but the brass bell required significant force to trigger. Either a large number of them had found the trail, or something else was approaching their sanctuary. There, Bradley whispered, pointing to a gap between pine trees about 200 yards out. Movement at 10 o'clock. Marcus adjusted his scope and felt his blood run cold. Not infected shambling through the forest, but 3 men in military-style gear moving with tactical precision. They carried assault rifles and wore body armor, but their movements were wrong, too aggressive, too predatory for legitimate military personnel. Not guard, Marcus murmured. Wrong equipment, wrong formation. Then who? Scavengers. The kind of people who see crisis as opportunity. Marcus had heard reports on the radio about groups like this, armed civilians who were using the collapse of law enforcement to take whatever they wanted from whoever couldn't stop them. The lead figure raised his hand, signaling the others to halt. Through his scope, Marcus could see the man studying the cabin, probably noting the solar panels, the Well-maintained structure, the signs of current habitation. Everything that marked this as a valuable target. We can't let them know we're here, Marcus said quietly. If they think this place is occupied, they'll either attack immediately or call for backup. What do we do? Marcus watched the three men begin to move again, spreading out in a flanking pattern that suggested military training. We make them think they found an empty cabin, and hope they decide it's not worth their time. But even as he said it, Marcus was calculating distances, ammunition counts, and defensive positions, because he'd spent 3 years preparing for everything he could imagine. And he'd imagined this scenario too. He just hadn't imagined facing it with his neighbors, children depending on him for their lives. The three armed men approached with practiced caution, using hand signals and tactical movement that confirmed Marcus's worst suspicions. These weren't desperate survivors or confused civilians. They were predators who'd adapted quickly to the new reality where strength determined survival. "Stay absolutely still," Marcus whispered to Bradley. "Don't even breathe loud. If they think this place is abandoned, they might just take what they can carry and leave." Through his scope, Marcus watched the leader signal his companions to circle the cabin. The man wore military surplus gear and moved like someone with combat experience. His rifle was clean and well-maintained, suggesting access to supplies and ammunition that most survivors lacked. Jennifer's voice came through the emergency communicator, barely audible. "Marcus, the children are asking why we're hiding. What do I tell them?" "Tell them we're playing a very important game of hide-and-seek," Marcus replied. "Winner gets extra chocolate from the emergency rations." The leader reached the cabin's front door and tested the handle carefully. Marcus had left it unlocked deliberately. A locked door would suggest current occupation, while an open one might indicate abandonment. The man slipped inside, weapon ready, scanning for threats or valuable supplies. "He's inside," Bradley whispered. "What if he finds evidence we're here?" Marcus had prepared for this possibility. The cabin's interior was arranged to look temporarily abandoned rather than actively occupied. Sleeping bags rolled up and stacked, food supplies partially depleted but not recently used, radio equipment powered down. A casual search would suggest previous occupants who'd moved on days ago. Through the window, they watched the intruder emerge after 5 minutes and signal his companions. The three men conferred in low voices, their body language suggesting disagreement. One pointed toward the cabin, apparently arguing for a thorough search. Another gestured toward the forest, possibly advocating for moving on to easier targets. The leader made the decision, pointing 2 fingers at his eyes, then sweeping toward the surrounding area. They were going to search the perimeter before deciding whether to establish a base here or continue hunting. "They're not leaving," Marcus realized. "They think this location has strategic value. What do we do?" "We wait for them to separate, then eliminate the threat." Marcus checked his rifle's magazine. 3 targets, unknown ammunition counts, at least one with military training. Not ideal odds, but manageable. Bradley stared at him. "You're talking about killing them." "I'm talking about protecting your children from men who would definitely kill us if they found us." Marcus adjusted his position to get a better angle on the searchers. "You heard the radio reports, Bradley. Armed groups taking what they want when they want it. Women, children, supplies, everything's a resource to people like this." The hard truth settled over Bradley like a weight. In the old world, he could have called police, relied on laws and social contracts to protect his family. But the old world had died with the first infected outbreak, and the new world operated by much simpler rules. One searcher moved toward their concealed position, using trees for cover as he worked closer to the cabin. Marcus tracked him through the scope, calculating distance and wind factors. The man wore no identifying patches or insignia, but his gear was too good for casual looting. Organized group, probably with a base of operations and multiple teams working the area. "Take the shot," Bradley whispered urgently. Not yet. Sound carries in these woods. If I miss or don't drop him immediately, his friends will know our position. Marcus steadied his breathing. One chance to do this right. The searchers stepped into a small clearing 30 yards from their position, momentarily exposed as he scanned for signs of recent habitation. Marcus had a perfect shot, but taking it would announce their presence to the other two men, who were currently out of sight. The emergency communicator crackled with Jennifer's voice. "Marcus, Emma needs to use the bathroom. I don't know how much longer I can keep them quiet." Time was running out. Either Marcus acted now, or they'd be discovered by natural circumstances beyond their control. The careful balance of stealth versus action was tilting toward confrontation, whether he wanted it or not. "Bradley, do you remember the emergency procedures I showed you yesterday? Get the family to the creek exit. Follow the upstream trail to checkpoint Alpha. Wait for your signal or 48 hours, whichever comes first." "Good. When I start shooting, you have exactly 30 seconds to get them out of the cabin and moving. Don't look back, don't wait for me, don't try to help. Your job is to keep your family alive." The searcher moved closer, now only 20 yards away. Through his scope, Marcus could see the man's face clearly, younger than expected. Maybe mid-20s, with the lean look of someone who'd been living rough for weeks. Probably not evil by nature, just someone who'd chosen to take from others rather than prepare for himself. Like Bradley had been, in a different way. Always taking the easy path. Always assuming someone else would handle the difficult work of actual preparation and planning. "I won't forget this," Bradley said quietly. "Whatever happens, I won't forget what you've done for us. Survive first, remember later." Marcus settled into firing position. On 3, 1, 2. The searcher's radio crackled with his leader's voice. "Connor, anything on the north side?" "Negative, place looks clean. Might be worth using as a resupply point." Marcus's finger found the trigger. The conversation had given him crucial intelligence. They were part of a larger operation, probably with regular check-ins expected. Eliminating them quietly was no longer an option. "Change of plans," he whispered to Bradley. "We're going loud." The first shot echoed through the forest like thunder, and the New World's simple rules took full effect. The searcher named Connor dropped instantly, Marcus's bullet finding its mark with surgical precision. But the sound shattered the forest quiet, and within seconds his two companions were moving with trained efficiency toward Marcus's position. "Go! Go, go!" Marcus shouted into the communicator as he shifted to a new firing position. Through his scope, he could see the team leader directing his remaining partner to flank left while he advanced straight ahead. Military tactics executed with deadly competence. Bradley's voice came through the emergency channel, breathless and urgent. "We're moving to extraction point. Emma twisted her ankle, but she's walking. Keep moving. Don't stop for anything." Marcus tracked the flanking man through the trees, waiting for a clear shot. "I'll catch up when I can." The team leader's voice boomed through the forest. Connor, report." When no answer came, the leader switched tactics. "I know you're out there. We're not looking for trouble. Just want to talk about sharing resources." Marcus almost laughed at the transparent lie. He'd heard similar offers on the radio from survivor groups who'd been negotiated with by armed scavengers. The stories always ended the same way. Movement caught his eye. The flanking man had worked around to Marcus's right side, using a fallen log for cover. Good positioning, but Marcus had prepared for exactly this scenario. The defensive positions around the cabin included overlapping fields of fire and multiple fallback routes. The second shot took the flanker center mass, spinning him behind the log where he lay motionless. 2 down, 1 to go. But the leader was the most dangerous, and now he knew approximately where Marcus was shooting from. "You just made a big mistake, friend," the leader called out. "My people will be looking for us when we don't check in tonight." You've got maybe 6 hours before they come looking with a lot more firepower than you can handle. Marcus didn't respond. The threat was probably real. Organized scavenger groups typically operated with backup protocols and regular communication schedules. But engaging in conversation would only give the man more information about Marcus's position and capabilities. Through the scope, Marcus caught glimpses of the leader moving between trees, but never long enough for a clean shot. The man was good, using terrain and concealment expertly. This wasn't going to be quick or easy. The emergency communicator crackled. "Marcus, we reached the creek. David fell in, but he's okay. Which way upstream?" "Follow the trail markers." Red blazes on trees, about 50 yards apart. Marcus spotted movement and fired, but his shot splintered bark instead of finding flesh. "Keep the children between you and Jennifer. Bradley takes point." "Copy that. Marcus... Be careful." The leader had gone quiet, no more taunting or threats. He was either positioning for a final assault or preparing to withdraw and report back to his group. Either option was dangerous: immediate confrontation or eventual revenge with superior numbers. Marcus made his decision. Rather than wait for the leader to act, he would force the engagement on his terms. He pulled a smoke grenade from his kit, something left over from his army days that he'd kept for emergency situations exactly like this. The grenade landed 30 yards away, quickly filling a section of forest with dense white smoke. Marcus used the distraction to move to a new position, one that offered better angles on the leader's likely approaches to the cabin. "Clever," the leader's voice came from somewhere in the smoke. "Military training?" Still Marcus didn't respond. But he filed away the information. The man was experienced enough to recognize tactical smoke deployment, which meant he definitely had formal training somewhere. A shadow moved through the smoke, barely visible but enough for Marcus to track. He held his fire, waiting for a clear target. The leader was trying to use the smoke for cover while advancing on Marcus's last known position. "Your friends are heading upstream, aren't they?" The leader continued. "Creek bed's the obvious extraction. Route from here. My people know these woods pretty well. We'll find them eventually." The threat against the Morrison family triggered something cold and focused in Marcus's mind. He'd spent 3 years being dismissed as paranoid by people who assumed the world would always be safe and civilized. Now the world had changed, and those same people were depending on his paranoia to keep them alive. He wouldn't let them down. Marcus pulled his sidearm and fired 3 rapid shots into the air, well away from any targets. The leader would hear the shots and probably assume Marcus was panicking or running low on ammunition. A tactical deception that might draw him into overconfidence. The bait worked. The leader emerged from the smoke, weapon raised, moving quickly toward what he thought was a weakened opponent. Marcus tracked him through the scope, leading the target perfectly as the man stepped into the open. The final shot ended the immediate threat, but Marcus knew it was only the beginning. The leader's words about backup weren't just psychological warfare, they were operational reality. More scavengers would come looking, and they'd be prepared for resistance. Marcus grabbed essential supplies from the cabin and started after the Morrison family. Behind him, smoke continued to rise from the grenade, mixing with the afternoon mist to obscure the scene of their first victory in the New World. But as he followed the red trail blazes upstream, Marcus was already planning for the battles yet to come. Marcus caught up with the Morrison family at Checkpoint Alpha, a natural rock shelter 2 miles upstream, where the creek bent sharply around a granite outcropping. They'd made good time despite Emma's twisted ankle, but the stress of their forced march showed in their faces. "Are they dead?" Bradley asked without preamble as Marcus approached their hiding spot. "All 3. But their leader mentioned backup." Marcus checked his watch. "We have maybe 4 hours before they're missed, probably 6 before a search team gets organized." Jennifer was treating Emma's ankle with supplies from her emergency pack, wrapping it carefully while trying to keep her daughter's spirits up. "How many more of them are there?" unknown. Could be a small cell, could be a larger operation. Marcus studied their surroundings, noting defensive positions and escape routes. Either way, we can't stay in this area. They know we're here now. David. Morrison sat on a fallen log, his clothes still damp from his tumble in the creek. Are the bad men coming to hurt us? Not if we stay smart and keep moving, Marcus replied. Remember what I told you about being prepared? Well, I prepared for this too. The radio crackled with an incoming transmission from the National Guard. Thompson Morrison family, this is Sergeant Rodriguez. We have your alternate extraction coordinates. How copy? Marcus grabbed the microphone. Rodriguez, this is Thompson. We copy, but our situation has changed. Encountered hostile survivors at our shelter location. Need immediate evacuation if possible. Negative on immediate pickup, Thompson. We're dealing with a major infected surge. From the Millfield area. Earliest extraction is 1800 hours tomorrow at coordinates I'm about to transmit. The coordinates Rodriguez provided were for an abandoned ranger station 12 miles northeast, deep in National Forest territory. Rough terrain, but also isolated enough to avoid both infected hordes and scavenger groups. 12 miles, Bradley said after Marcus relayed the information. With Emma's ankle and 2 young children, can we make it? We'll make it because we have to. Marcus pulled out a topographic map and spread it on a flat rock. The route follows established trails most of the way. It's not easy, but it's doable. Jennifer looked at their destination on the map. What if we don't make it by 6 tomorrow evening? Then we wait for the next extraction window. Marcus traced their route with his finger. But Rodriguez was clear. They're pulling back to consolidated positions after this round of evacuations. Missed this window, and we're on our own indefinitely. They spent an hour at Checkpoint Alpha, treating Emma's ankle properly and redistributing supplies to balance the load. Marcus had prepared the emergency packs with exactly this scenario in mind. Each adult could carry enough for themselves, plus 1 child, leaving the children free to focus on movement rather than burden. Marcus, Bradley said as they prepared to move out. What you said back at the cabin about the difference between preparation and paranoia. I think I understand now, yeah? Paranoia is stockpiling supplies so you can survive while everyone else dies. Preparation is stockpiling supplies so everyone can survive together. Bradley adjusted his pack straps. You could have left us behind. Could have taken your supplies and headed for the extraction point alone. But you didn't. Marcus checked his compass bearing. Surviving alone isn't really surviving. It's just postponing the inevitable. They began their trek through terrain that Marcus had scouted extensively during his weekend disappearances from Millfield. Every trail marker, every water source, every potential shelter along their route had been cataloged in preparation for exactly this kind of emergency movement. How did you know? Jennifer asked as they walked. How did you know to prepare for all of this? I didn't know specifically, but I knew that complex systems eventually fail, and when they do, it happens fast. Marcus helped Emma navigate a fallen tree blocking their path. Most people assume civilization is permanent, but it's actually very fragile, held together by infrastructure and social contracts that can disappear overnight. 2 hours into their hike, the radio picked up disturbing transmissions from the direction of their former shelter. Multiple voices, aggressive tones, the sound of structures being searched and probably destroyed. The scavenger backup had arrived ahead of schedule. They found the cabin, Marcus confirmed, listening to the chatter. Good thing we left when we did. Bradley paused on the trail, looking back toward the sound of distant voices. They're going to follow us, aren't they? Probably. But tracking people through forest terrain is harder than most people think, especially when those people know how to minimize their trail signs. Marcus pointed to their feet. Notice how I've been having us step on rocks and tree roots instead of soft ground. No footprints to follow, As evening approached, they reached a waypoint Marcus had prepared months ago, a natural cave system hidden behind a waterfall where they could rest safely for the night. The cave was dry, defensible, and completely invisible from ground level. "This is incredible," Jennifer said, looking around the prepared shelter. "You've got sleeping areas, fire pit, even a latrine." "Contingency planning," Marcus replied. "I identified and prepared 12 different shelter points along various evacuation routes from Millfield. This is number 7. Emma Morrison curled up in her sleeping bag, exhausted from the day's hike. "Uncle Marcus, are we going to be okay?" Marcus knelt beside her. "We're going to be better than okay, Emma. Tomorrow we're going to reach the helicopters. And they're going to take us somewhere safe where there are no more sick people. Promise?" Marcus looked at her parents, then back at the little girl who'd been forced to grow up too fast over the past few days. "I promise we're going to do everything possible to make that happen." Outside their hidden shelter, the forest settled into night sounds, owls calling, wind through pine branches, the distant splash of the waterfall. Normal sounds that suggested they'd successfully evaded pursuit, at least temporarily, but Marcus maintained watch through the night anyway. Because in the new world, paranoia and preparation had become the same thing. Dawn broke gray and cold over the forest, with the distant sound of helicopters echoing through the valley. Marcus had been awake for hours, monitoring radio chatter between National Guard units as they coordinated the final evacuation flights from across the region. "That's our ride," he announced, waking the Morrison family. "But we've got 6 miles to cover, and the terrain gets rough from here." Bradley rolled out of his sleeping bag, joints stiff from sleeping on stone. "How rough?" Marcus pointed to the topographic map. 3 river crossings, 2 ridge climbs, and a section that's basically rock scrambling. "Doable, but we need to maintain pace if we're going to make the 1800 pickup." Emma's ankle was better after a night's rest, but she'd need help on the difficult sections. David had developed a slight cough during the night, probably from his creek dunking combined with stress and exertion. Nothing serious yet, but Marcus made mental notes to monitor both children closely. They broke camp efficiently, following procedures Marcus had drilled into them over the past few days. Every piece of equipment had a specific place, every person had specific responsibilities. The same organizational thinking that Bradley had once dismissed as obsessive was now keeping them alive. "Radio contact," Jennifer announced, adjusting the frequency. "It's Rodriguez. All evacuation teams, this is Control. Be advised we have hostile survivor groups operating in sectors 7 through 12. Multiple reports of armed civilians interfering with rescue operations." Marcus grabbed the microphone. "Control, this is Thompson Group. We encountered hostiles yesterday at our previous location. Request intel on Sector 9 activity." Thompson Group, Sector 9 shows elevated radio chatter, consistent with organized scavenging operations. Estimate 8 to 12 individuals, military-style equipment. Avoid if possible. Copy that, Control. Marcus folded the map, recalculating their route. "We're going to have to swing wide around the main trail system. Adds distance, but keeps us away from the scavenger search patterns." They set out through terrain that tested everyone's endurance. The children handled it better than expected, their natural agility helping them navigate obstacles that challenged the adults. Emma had developed a technique for rock scrambling that favored her injured ankle, while David turned the difficult sections into games that kept his spirits up. "How much farther?" Jennifer asked during their midday rest at a mountain stream. Marcus checked his GPS unit. 4 miles to the ranger station. We're making good time despite the detour." The radio crackled with an emergency transmission. All units. Large infected horde moving northeast from Millfield ruins. Estimated 200+ individuals. Evacuation timeline may be compressed. Bradley looked up from refilling water bottles. 200 infected? Fire probably drove them out of the town ruins, Marcus explained. They'll follow terrain features, probably end up in this valley system eventually. He studied the map. Again, but they move slowly. We should reach extraction before they become a factor. 2 hours later, they heard the first sounds of pursuit. Voices calling to each other through the forest. The distinctive crack of radio transmissions. The sound of people moving through brush with less care for stealth than survival. The scavengers found our trail, Marcus realized. They're tracking us. How is that possible? Bradley asked. You said we weren't leaving footprints. Footprints aren't the only sign. Disturbed vegetation, broken spider webs, scent trails. Marcus listened to the pursuit sounds, calculating distance and direction. Professional tracker could follow us if they knew what to look for. Jennifer checked her watch. How far to the extraction point? 2 miles. But they're going to catch up before we get there. Marcus made a tactical decision. Bradley, take your family and keep moving along the trail. Red blazes, same as before. Don't stop, don't look back. What are you going to do? Buy you time. Marcus checked his rifle and spare magazines. Same as yesterday. Get to the extraction point and signal the guard that you're being pursued. Bradley grabbed Marcus's arm. You can't fight all of them alone. I don't have to fight them all. Just slow them down long enough for you to reach safety. Marcus looked at Emma and David, both exhausted but still moving. Those children need to get out of here. That's what matters. Marcus, Jennifer said quietly, thank you for everything. Thank me when you're all safe. Marcus moved toward the sound of approaching voices. Now go, and remember, whatever happens, keep moving toward those helicopters. The Morrison family disappeared down the trail, Bradley supporting Emma while Jennifer carried most of David's weight. Marcus watched until they were out of sight, then turned to face the pursuit that was closing in through the forest. Through the trees, he could see at least 5 figures moving with tactical precision. More than yesterday, better equipped, and definitely motivated by revenge for their dead companions. They'd tracked the Morrison family across miles of rough terrain, which meant they had both skill and determination. Marcus found a defensive position among a cluster of boulders that offered good sight lines and multiple escape routes. The same principles he'd used at the cabin, adapted to different terrain. Control the engagement, force them to come to him, make every shot count. The radio on his belt crackled with Rodriguez's voice. All evacuation teams, this is final call. Lift off in 30 minutes. Any survivors not at designated pickup points will be left behind. 30 minutes. Marcus checked his watch, calculated distances and travel times. The Morrison family could make it if they maintained pace and encountered no delays. But only if Marcus kept their pursuers occupied long enough. He settled into firing position and waited for the scavengers to come within range. In the distance, helicopter rotors grew louder, carrying the promise of escape for people who'd trusted a paranoid neighbor's preparations. Marcus had spent 3 years being called obsessive, paranoid, antisocial. Now those same qualities were the only thing standing between 4 innocent people and a world that had forgotten the difference between civilization and survival. The first scavenger appeared through the trees, and Marcus reminded himself why he'd prepared for everything. The lead scavenger moved with the confidence of someone who'd been hunting humans for weeks, his rifle sweeping methodically across potential hiding spots. Marcus counted 5 figures total, spread in a loose line formation that suggested professional training. These weren't desperate survivors. They were predators who'd found their calling in the collapse of civilization. Thompson, the leader's voice echoed through the forest. We know you're out there. Your friends left a trail a blind man could follow. Marcus didn't respond, tracking the speaker through his scope. The man wore military surplus gear and moved like former special forces, Probably someone who'd been preparing for societal collapse long before the infected outbreak. But preparing for the wrong reasons, not to protect and preserve, but to dominate and take. "We found your little hidey hole back at the creek," another voice called out. "Nice setup." "Professional work, you military?" Still Marcus held his fire. Let them talk, let them reveal positions and numbers. Every second they spent trying to draw him out was another second the Morrison family had to reach the extraction point. Through his earpiece, he heard helicopter rotors growing louder. The guard was beginning final approach to the ranger station. 2 miles ahead. If the Morrison family had maintained pace, they should be in sight of the landing zone by now. "Here's what's going to happen, Thompson," the leader continued, his voice closer now. "You're going to come out peaceful-like, and we're going to have a conversation about your supply caches. Do this easy, and maybe your friends live through." The next hour. The threat against the Morrison family crystallized Marcus's resolve. These weren't people who could be reasoned with or bargained with. They were cancer in the New World, parasites who would consume everything decent that tried to rebuild from the ruins. Marcus fired his first shot. The bullet took the nearest scavenger center mass, dropping him instantly. The others scattered. With practiced efficiency, seeking cover while maintaining their formation. Professional reaction, confirming Marcus's assessment of their capabilities. "Bad choice, Thompson," the leader shouted from behind a tree. Now this gets messy. Automatic weapons fire erupted from 3 positions, converging on Marcus's location with deadly precision. He rolled behind his boulder as bullets sparked off stone, ships of granite stinging his face. These men had serious firepower and the training to use it effectively. Marcus shifted to a secondary position, using terrain features he'd scouted during his route planning. Every rock, every fallen log, every depression in the ground had been cataloged as potential cover during exactly this kind of engagement. His second shot caught a scavenger trying to flank left, spinning the man around before he collapsed behind. A fallen pine. 4 left, but they were adapting quickly to his tactics. The radio crackled with Rodriguez's voice. "Thompson Group, this is Control. We have your people at the extraction point. Where are you?" Marcus keyed his microphone between gunshots. "Control, this is Thompson. Morrison family is secured. I'm engaged with hostiles 2 miles south of pickup. Execute extraction immediately. Thompson, we can provide air support if you can mark your position. Negative, Control, too close to friendlies. Execute extraction now." Marcus fired again, forcing a scavenger back into cover. Repeat. Execute extraction now. Through the forest, he could hear the distinctive whine of helicopter engines spooling up for takeoff. The Morrison family was leaving, escaping to safety. Because a paranoid neighbor had spent 3 years preparing for scenarios they'd dismissed as impossible. "You're going to die out here for nothing, Thompson," the leader called out. "Your friends are gone. Nobody's coming to save you." "Don't need saving," Marcus replied, speaking for the first time since the engagement began. "Just need to finish the job." He pulled his last smoke grenade, calculating wind direction and terrain features. The scavengers expected him to use it for concealment during withdrawal, the standard tactical application. Instead, Marcus used it to mask an aggressive advance. Moving through the smoke with practiced stealth, Marcus closed distance on the 2 remaining active shooters. They were focused on his last known position, expecting a defensive fight from a dug-in opponent. They weren't prepared for close-quarters engagement from someone willing to take the initiative. The 3rd scavenger died before he realized Marcus had flanked his position. The 4th tried to surrender when he found a rifle. Barrel pressed against his neck. "Where's your base camp?" Marcus demanded. "Go to hell." Marcus relieved him of weapons and equipment, then zip-tied his hands with restraints from his emergency kit. "You're going to walk out of these woods and tell your people that this area is under protection. Anyone who threatens survivors gets The same treatment your friends just received. You can't protect everyone, Thompson. There's more of us than you think. Maybe, but I only have to protect the people who matter. Marcus checked his watch. The helicopters would be long gone by now, carrying the Morrison family to safety. And today, that's exactly what happened. He left the surviving scavenger, tied to a tree with enough slack to eventually work free, but not quickly. By the time the man reached his base camp, Marcus would be miles away, following his own extraction route to a secondary safe zone he'd prepared for exactly this contingency. As he moved through the forest, Marcus reflected on the irony of the situation. For 3 years, Bradley Morrison had filed complaints about his preparedness activities, calling them antisocial and paranoid. Today, those same activities had saved Bradley's family while giving them a chance to rebuild in whatever came next. The radio crackled with a final transmission from Rodriguez. Thompson, this is Control. Morrison family confirms safe extraction. They want you to know they'll never forget what you did for them. Marcus smiled grimly and continued walking deeper into the mountains, where other prepared shelters waited for the long work of rebuilding civilization. Behind him, smoke from distant fires marked the end of the old world. Ahead lay whatever came next, and Marcus Thompson was ready for that too. In the new world, paranoia and preparation had indeed become the same thing. And sometimes being right about the worst-case scenario was the greatest gift you could give to people who'd never believed it could happen. The dead might walk, but hope still breathed in those who'd refused to fall.